Hello, people. Yes, so I'm here again to further the conversation about building a financial structure that can help you start your journey to creating wealth. So, in the previous video, we talked about budgeting, and we said budgets is equal to your income minus your expenses minus your savings. And we gave a little formula to help you um, determine how to break your income so that you're able to have some form of control over your expenses. Now, one thing you should realize is that your expense will always try to be more than your income. It's a it's an economic law that is proven that every time your income increases, your expenses try to overshadow it. And that means that if you're not deliberate about how you channel your income, you're going to always see that you're spending more than you're taking in. And I'm sure many of us salary earners know what I'm talking about, where you always have to be in deficit before the next salary comes, almost like the next salary is gone even before it lands. And the only way you can avoid that cycle is if you build a budget and you put a cap to what can be spent per time, right? The most biggest problem many people have is that there is no cap to their spending. In fact, they are not even aware of how much they're spending. Sometimes they're spending times two, times three, times four, sometimes times five of their income, and they're wondering why they're struggling from month to month. It's just because you've not put those systems and structures in place to hold you accountable. So, for example, I mentioned in the last video that you need to cap your expenses at 70% of your income. Now, regardless of how much you're spending, how much you're making, you must never exceed 70% in terms of your expenses. Now, sometimes, there might be reasons to deviate from that a little bit, but it should never be a norm. In other words, and I said, if you're a bit more aggressive, maybe you have something you're trying to achieve in a shorter time, you also want to make sure that you adjust your expenses downwards. Now, the truth is, the lesser your expense, the more you would have resources to get other things that are essential. So it might be investment funds, it might be that certification you're trying to pay for, it might be, it can be anything that furthers your vision and moves you forward. Unlike if you're burning everything, because my friend will always say that one of the most painful expenses is fuel, that when you buy fuel, after you drive or you turn on the ignition of that thing, within a few hours, the fuel is completely exhausted. You can't even see traces of it, and that it feels like that's how the money burns, and I'm sure many of us, can relate to that. And that's why it's important for you to put a cap on your expenses. So if you're going to go with the 70-30 rule for those who pay tithes, that's 70-20-10, which means the 20 is for savings and the 10% is your tithe. And for those who don't pay tithe, of course, whatever works for you, but your expense is the most important of all the components, which means you must control how high it goes. For me, I've recommended 70%. Yes, because I've seen over time that if you save 10-20% of your income, you have a chance at doing great things with that buffer that you're creating, right? And so that's why it's important for you to pay attention to your expenses. Very important. Now, I was talking about your savings being like containers. So, for example, many of us have different things we're trying to do down the line. Maybe you want to go on vacation with your family, or you want to get a particular training, or you want to get a particular tool for your business. It can be many things. And sometimes, we are just saving in one place and then something comes, maybe somebody falls sick or something happens and you go and, retrieve the money and then you start over again. Now, the way to avoid that is by creating containers for your savings, right? So the 20% or 30% that you extracted from your income, you want to put them into containers. So, and those containers will be like, I always use the term seed for your savings. Your savings are like seed. And when you go to a farm, right, you have specific names for each of the seed that you take to the farm. It's either maize or yam, or there's a specific name, which means that your savings must be divided into specific categories, right? So, for example, I always recommend an emergency savings, emergency fund, which is supposed to be like 6 months worth of your essential expenses. Essential. Now that's a key word, essential expenses. So in other words, if you lose your income for 6 months, your essentials will be taken care of. Now, this is something that you need to pay attention to, because many people, they are one sack letter away from trouble. If you lose your income today, you could go into a meltdown, literally, right? And your emergency fund is supposed to create a buffer for you to, settle and find your way forward. So, for example, you lose your job, your emergency fund is supposed to give you that soft landing before you find the next thing to do. And this is something that many people are not very familiar with, which is why you need to pay attention. Of course, how do you know your essential expenses if you have no record of your expenses in the first place? You now begin to see the importance of your budget, because once you have a budget, everything becomes documented. You document all income, including gifts, including, um, it could be, yes, gifts from friends, or even people who refund loans that they've taken a long time ago, undocumented loans. That's also an income within the period that you are assessing, right? So you record all your income, you record all your expenses, no matter how small. There's always this urge to ignore the small expenses and think, this is not much. I can. But the danger of that is that the little foxes are the ones that spoil the vine. So you have to pay attention to the small expenses as well. So which means you have to record everything from the biggest to the smallest. And then, of course, your savings, you have to name them specifically. So if you have 5 things you want to achieve, down the line, name them specifically and allocate parts of your savings to each of them, right? And once you're able to do that, I can assure you that within a few months or years, you will see the effect of that prudence in the quality of your life, right? I always say that the only regret I have trading crypto was that I did not start saving aggressively when I started. It took me like 3 years into my journey before I realized that, oh, I'm making money every day. Why am I waiting till end of the month to save? And then I started saving every month. Every day. And that saved me from a lot of things, because when I went through a rough period where losses were coming to me like food, it was that savings that gave me a soft landing. If not, I would have run mad, literally. And that's why you need to have these structures in place. They're going to help you, they're going to protect you when things get rough. Yeah. And I believe that once you're able to get these things in place, you'll be able to make very good progress from there. I think in one of my videos, I'm going to do like a small spreadsheet that can give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Yeah, thank you for listening, and catch you some other time.